Inner suburbs, England, 28th of December, 2006. I know this date because it was the day before my 16th birthday. A close friend of mine had invited me to a house party that evening and said I could stay at his parents' place after. Around 8ish, we headed over to the party. I didn't know the girl whose house it was, but I knew a few people there. It was a fun party. We drank a few beers and laughed like the goofy teens that we were, and probably around 1 in the morning, and now, technically my birthday, my friend and I headed back to turn in for the night. We got to his place, and he showed me through the back of their house on the ground floor, where his mom had made a sofa bed for me in their conservatory. I had assumed I'd be crashing on his bedroom floor like I had done in the past, so this was a win. He went upstairs to hit the hay, and I settled in. Shortly after, his cat, whose name I forget, jumped up onto the bed for some fuss. I stroked the cat and soon fell asleep. An unknown amount of time later, I awoke suddenly because the cat had been sleeping next to me and had jumped off the bed violently and sprinted out the room. As I opened my eyes, there was an intense, bright white light beaming through the glass and perspex roof of the conservatory, seemingly shining directly at me. I could still perceive darkness in my periphery, which told me it was still night. And then, it was morning. I was laying in the bed on my back, looking up at the sky. This was extremely disorientating. What was that light? When did I see it? Was that just now? It can't have been. The strangest thing was that I was very aware of the fact that I hadn't gone through the process of waking up. I was just there, fully awake. I think the best way to describe this is like cutting out a segment of film and stitching the ends together, or like skipping a scene while watching a movie. My phone said it was around 9 in the morning, and I could hear someone in the kitchen making breakfast, so I got dressed and carried on with my day. I labelled the event as weird and stored it away in the back of my mind. I'll add here that if the roles were reversed and it was someone telling me this story, I'd be pretty skeptical. First of all, any time I hear a story involving someone in bed asleep, I always think that a vivid or weird dream is the culprit. And secondly, when it comes to the bright light and then being awake, anyone will be justified in thinking, yeah, genius, that's called waking up. But the point I want to emphasize here is that we've all woken up thousands of times before, if you're old like me. And some of those times can be quite disorientating, but this was a completely different experience to waking up. So there it is. It's been just over 14 years since this happened, and I've never breathed a word to anyone about it, not even my wife. There is the obvious abduction implication to this story, but I'm not sure exactly where I stand on that subject, and taken at face value, this experience doesn't actually include aliens or spacecraft, etc. I've often wondered if hypnotic regression would shed any light on this, but I'm actually afraid of what it might bring up. Also, is the fact that it was my 16th birthday somehow significant? To date, it's the only really weird experience I've ever had. I'd love to hear suggestions, or if anyone has had a similar experience. When I was around 12, my younger brother was 6. We went on a family holiday to France and stayed in an old monk's monastery that had been converted into a holiday cottage. Downstairs was a lounge and a kitchen, all with the original stone walls and flooring. To the right, there was a large spiral wooden staircase, leading upstairs to 2 large bedrooms and a bathroom. On the first day we got there, my parents were tired from the drive. My brother and I were sharing a large room with 2 single beds. The only other piece of furniture was a massive wooden closet that was intricately carved. I can only compare it to the wardrobe from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. My brother's bed was next to it, and mine was at the opposite side of the room. Being kids, we weren't tired. We each laid on our separate beds facing away from each other, playing on our Nintendo DS Lites until we got too tired and then each tried to nap. For a short while, my brother makes a noise. I ignore it and carry on. He shouts to me, For God's sake, stop breathing down my neck. I snapped back at him, being argumentative siblings, explaining that I didn't. I thought he was winding me up, so I ignored it. Shortly after, he jumped up to face me and again shouted, "All I can hear you is breathing down my neck. I'm telling Mum." After that, it's needless to say I was so scared that I ran straight to my parents' room in terror, past the wardrobe that made a loud creak as I did so. It still gives me chills to this day, thinking about it. The next night, we all slept in my parents' room in their bed. We were all terrified. During the night, you could hear what I could only describe as heavy footsteps walking up the spiral wooden staircase that connected the hallway outside of their room to the downstairs lounge. During the course of the holiday, we got used to this, to be honest, as we just summed it up to maybe other people next door being loud. Although it's worth remembering it here, as we didn't know if we had neighbours on that side or not. My younger brother grew increasingly nervous around bedtime each night, scared of what may happen. To give him a change of scenery and ease his mind, as he hated my parents' room, we went and all slept in what was to be our original room with 2 single beds. I slept with my mum and my brother with my dad. I don't know what time we heard an almighty crash. My dad doesn't believe in the paranormal, but he thought maybe someone broke in, so he got up to go and look. He didn't look for long and came back and said everything was fine. The next morning, my mum and I went into the parents' room to give it a clean, and the bedside lamp was on the floor, smashed. I was really scared being young, but my parents tried to rationalise it again to strong winds, though no windows were open, especially as my dad checked that night. My dad said he didn't see the lamp on the floor as it was dark when he was looking around, and it was behind the bed. We were meant to be staying in the conversion for 7 days, but after this, we left early. On day 5, I was upstairs with my mum in the bathroom. I needed a shower, but the shower was an old silver one that was connected through the stone. It was really stiff, and my mum couldn't twist it to turn it on properly. My dad and brother were out on a walk. We decided to brush our teeth, and then my mum tried again. For this to happen, my mum had to put her whole arm into the shower to get to the back, where the nozzle was located. After a few tries, my mum gave in. She started walking back to the door where I stood, as I was super scared of being in any room in that place. As she walked to me, the shower turned itself on. We both screamed and ran downstairs to wait for my brother and dad. I like to have explanations for things that happen, as I'm a 70-30 skeptic myself. But honestly, I don't have one for this day. It was unpredictable and unexplainable, and I'll never forget it. Our next door neighbours on the left were French, but through broken English and French, they told us that cans in their kitchen moved every night, as when they woke up in the morning, they were in a different location. Each night, we heard footsteps, and although I don't remember it myself, perhaps I was too young, my mum said the one thing that scared her the most was the sounds of moaning and deep groaning at night. After the shower incident, we just felt scared and uneasy in the home and made the sad decision to leave 2 days early. We drove up to the owner's house and said we wanted to leave early. We gave no information about what happened. He began to apologise and gave us our full deposit back and refunded us for the 2 nights lost. This leads me to believe we aren't the first to have done it. I had a dream where I was at my friend's house and was walking to their garage where we'd smoke weed. Now that I think about it, that garage didn't exist. It was a fabricated smoking room in my dream. Also, none of my friends were there. Anyways, I open the door and I'm immediately paralysed by this thing sitting and staring at me with white, piercing, bright eyes with pupils, legs crossed on their futon. Its eyes looked human, but like he put in white eye contacts. His head was huge. Well, he was huge. You could tell he was imposing, even though he was sitting down. Standing up, he'd be well over 7 feet. He had a goat head, but his horns were pointed down around his head, and they were massive. They reached around the side of his face, almost touching his chin. He had a goat face, but flatter and wider, with a black snout and bright red skin in other places across his face, almost as if by design. Very similar to Darth Maul or the demon from Insidious, but it was his skin, not face paint. He was wearing a black robe which covered most of his body, except his hooves. He has hooves like a goat and they were huge. I can't remember his fur colour, either brown, black or red. I don't remember what his hands looked like. He wasn't very expressive with them. He was calm and still when he spoke and didn't move much, which brings me to the next part. I was paralysed at first until he started talking. He spoke with 2 voices, much like in exorcism movies, and boy was he charming. The most charming and charismatic being I've ever spoken to. As soon as he started talking, I was immediately calmed down. Everything I'd say, he'd have a witty and charming response. He was so easy to speak with, I didn't even care that he resembled something else of Dante's Inferno, with a voice that was incredibly disturbing and unworldly. None of that mattered. He was chill as fuck. I don't remember what our conversation was about, but I know we shot the shit for what felt like 5 or 10 minutes, and then I left the room. I remember leaving on good terms with him. It felt like talking to an interesting friend. And then I woke up. I felt confused waking up. On one hand, I had just spoken with a demon. On the other hand, he was cool, interesting, and I didn't get on his bad side. Fast forward to 8 months. I'm dating a Native American girl. I've always been fascinated with the paranormal, and natives tend to be very open about that stuff, so I tell her about my dream. As I'm describing the thing I spoke with, her eyes lit up. She eagerly tells me to finish my story before she lets me know everything. After I'm done, she's like, "Holy shit, you spoke with Hoofman." She then tells me her cousin recently had a dream where she was visited by him and described him in the exact same way. Darth Maul skin, robes, etc. And this was before I knew him, much less her cousin. Apparently, Hoofman appears in your dreams and either just talks to you or asks you for something, and if you say no, something terrible happens to you. I don't think he asked me for anything. I never got the feeling of having to give up anything during my dream. I think we just kicked it. Weird for me to dream about him, as I'm not native, like, at all. Thank you, 23andMe. And I had no idea he existed. This could totally be me making up this figure in my head, being influenced by the demon's design on Insidious or something. But at that point, I haven't seen that movie for 8 years and I've only seen it once. I've also heard your mind can't make up faces in your dreams. Not sure how true that is, but this thing definitely had a unique facial structure I've never seen before, and it could emote like a human. I moved about 4 hours away from my hometown for college and stayed here to date. Every time I want to visit my parents, I will leave on a Friday night after work. Make sure I reach them at late night. At least I have the full Saturday with them before I drive back to the city on Sunday evening. Unfortunately, it gets pretty tiring driving after week-long work. One day, I was just too tired to drive. I know I shouldn't rush and should get some rest before continuing driving. Despite multiple stops to get some shut-eye, drank coffees and energy drinks, I'm just too tired to continue. Until I come to a point I'm about 1.5 hours away from my hometown. I stopped at a petrol station, drove to the side where there was less lighting, and tried to get some good sleep before continuing driving. This place had less lighting because it was close to a forest along the highway. There, I had this weird dream. I was actually still sleeping on my chair in the dream, but it was inside a bus and the person sitting next to me woke up to talk with me. We were talking about normal stuff for a short while. Then comes the weird part. He wanted to show me some photos. While going through the photos, there was one photo of me sleeping inside my car. The photo was taken from the passenger seat. I asked him how he got the photo. His smiling face turned very angry. Like, very angry. The dream reverted back to my car by now. I'm seated in the driver's seat, the person in the passenger seat from where the photo was taken. Now, I asked him what he was doing in my car. He asked me back, I'm asking you the same. What are you doing in my place? This time, I woke up to reality. I didn't say a single word. Wide awake now, just drove back to my hometown without a single stop. My fastest 1-hour drive ever on that road. After a few years, I was telling my close friend about this weird dream. When he asked me where it was, I told him, remember when we were driving last time? You had a leg cramp and swerved your car 180 and hit the divider? About 50 meters from there. My friend's face now turned pale and he said, my leg wasn't cramped that day. I saw something weird running across and tried to avoid it. I lied back then because when I look back, that thing wasn't there. I was scared, confused, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Around 2009 or 10, me and my friends decided we would ghost hunt. So my buddy found out about an old burnt down house in the country. The backstory behind this haunting is that a woman lived in that property and was into the occult activities. She had brought some local children to the house and they were never seen again. This angered the locals and they burnt her house down with her in it. I can't verify the accuracy of that story, it's just what I was told. Anyway, we go there in the middle of the night with our cell phones trying to each catch EVPs or something. We're there for a while and we catch something that sounded like a voice but otherworldly. I can't remember exactly what was said. Anyway, we decided to leave. So we rushed to the vehicle after hearing the recording. The person trailing behind all of us claims she felt a breath on her neck so she rushed faster. We go home, no problem. I live in this house at the time that always creeps me out. I would see shadow people periodically walking through my room at night. My dog hated the room. He wouldn't even go in there. My dog used to do random things like stare at the ceiling or into the closet and growl or bark aggressively. Anyways, I say all that to outline the fact that I've already had multiple paranormal experiences before this one that spooked me the most. So post ghost hunt, I go home. I'm already creeped out by the house and my room, so I set my TV to sleep every night a few hours after I fall asleep. I set the TV up like normal and passed out. An hour or so later, I wake up and look at the TV and it's on white noise. It shouldn't have been like that because my mum had satellite TV with premium channels. I had left it on a premium channel, so I was tripping out on it being on the white noise and grainy. Then I start hearing muffled moaning. Think covering someone's face with a pillow and them struggling to yell or something. So I look into the mirror directly across from my bed and I see what looks like a pale woman with long greasy hair and a dirty dress crawling down my wall directly towards me. At this point, I spaz out and my TV turns off. So it's dark and I frantically hit the light switch to see nothing. The weirder part is the next morning I woke up to take a shower, and as I'm walking towards the shower, I look in the mirror and notice scratches down the middle of the back. This was the first and last time I had seen anything manifest in that way. I think it was clearly something following me home. I wasn't really freaked until I went to bed that night. Everything was fine. I felt kind of creeped, but nothing unusual for an 11 or 12-year-old in a new house. I woke up in the middle of the night, no idea what time it was. I remember it so vividly, literally everything, even the way I was laying on the bed. I woke up with my head tilted, directly staring into the upper corner of the room, and I saw a young boy just sitting up there in the corner. He was wearing modern clothes though, nothing weird about his appearance, but of course I was startled as hell and jumped. After I startled, he disappeared. He didn't like to fade out or anything, literally just there 1 second and gone the next. I rolled over. The hall light was on, and I saw a man's shadow move across the floor. I don't remember much after that. Now, I know that seems like it could be a nightmare. Scared the hell out of me, but whatever. I begged to not have to sleep in that room, but nobody believed me, obviously. From that point on, as I was falling asleep, I'd hear a voice in my ear. Not a whisper or anything, but more like a distant shout or just a word. I don't remember any of what it was though. One night, I was falling asleep, and as I was about to close my eyes, I saw a black skirt beside me, as if someone was sitting very close to my head. Jumped up, and it was gone. Once, while I was in that room, my stepbrother came in, and when he left, he started crying. I didn't really care much because I figured he tripped or stepped on something, but my stepdad came in and shouted at me for throwing a plastic toy at him. I insisted that I didn't, because I didn't. Another thing about this room is there was always like a weird shadow coming from it. It could have been the architecture of the house, but I swear it was foreboding. I have one more clear memory of weird shit going down in that bedroom. From my account at least. I'm not a religious person, not anymore at least. But at the time I was, so I thought maybe bringing a Bible into the room would help. And as I sat reading it, I swear to fuck, there was breathing in the wall behind me. Raspy breathing. I ran out of there and outright refused to be in there anymore, and started sleeping on the couch or at relatives' houses. I'm guessing it wasn't an indicator that the Bible was significant. My guess is that whatever it was playing with me, letting me know that the Bible wasn't a safety net. One night when I was gone, my mom and stepdad got into a fight, and he ended up sleeping in my room. He stopped getting mad that I wouldn't sleep in there, and I got to move to a different room. One night, we were alone together, and I asked why I got to move rooms. I want to say that this was a horrible man, an abuser, someone who was awful to me. And he started crying. He said that when he slept in there, he saw a shadow across the wall of the room, holding a rifle or shotgun or something like that, and a man's voice. He wasn't sure if the man was talking to him or not, but he said the voice was talking about having to protect the children. He wouldn't tell me anything else, but he was straight up crying and I was stunned. No one went in that room anymore. My mom started to get freaked by the room when my infant sister's blankets ended up in the closet in the room somehow. I guess I wanted to post this to see what people thought, because although what I mostly experienced were 2 children, there was also a man. And I felt terror in that room. Demons? Spirits? I don't know. I'm not very well versed in paranormal terminology. I suppose I just wanted some opinions. This occurred in a medium-sized town in Oklahoma, if that's relevant. I've had people try to say the classic Native American spirits or whatever, but as I said, the children I saw were wearing modern clothes. ETA that my step-grandma told me some weird shit about the house too, but not just the room. She said she'd be babysitting and hear little footsteps down the hall. Get up and check and see that both kids were asleep. The kid that had my room before I did would complain about scratching in the wall, but that could have been rodents. He moved out of the room because my stepdad lost custody, so every other weekend they stayed over. They just slept in the living room with my stepdad. She said that my stepdad's ex would come home to the kitchen cabinets being open, but thought it was just my stepdad messing with her. Two years ago,
I was sent to Utah to help build a large warehouse in Jordan, which is one of the many smaller cities surrounding Salt Lake City. I was happy to get out of my home state, Arizona, and get into the lovely fall weather and mountain cool air that SLC is known for, as well as getting all the incentives the company was offering for out-of-state work. My crew had about 4 days off the entire month of October, so we took every opportunity to explore the city and experience nature. I looked into all the local hiking trails and was able to find Donut Falls on a hiking list. The falls looked impressive in the photos online. It ran through a cave and fell into a creek that went down the mountain. Just the type of scenic nature I miss out on in Phoenix. That Saturday, we were working along another shift. It was a beautiful cloudy day with fluffy, humid snow showers. We got out just after noon, and I invited my 2 co-worker buddies to come along. I returned to my hotel, did a quick change into casual winter wear, canvas shoes, jeans, sweater with layers, and met my co-workers downstairs where we all piled into my car. My heater had just gone out that week, but I wasn't concerned about it as the fan still worked, and we were dressed plenty warm for the mild evening chill. The snow was still quite light, so we hadn't planned for any intense weather on the trip. Plus, working in 0 degrees weather overnights had accumulated us to the cold conditions. We drove the short distance from South Jordan to Big Cottonwood Canyon and made our way up the winding road, taking in all the woodland ambience that surrounded us. The road eventually passed a small parking area that opened up to the Donut Falls trailhead. We parked and prepared for our trek up the trail. The snow had started to pick up and was now making larger flakes, but we brushed it off because a little inclement weather wasn't about to stop our once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see some amazing wilderness. The hike was pleasant. We had a snowball fight, shared a flask, and told stories about skinwalkers and our cultural folklore. The trail was mildly challenging. It followed a creek up the canyon, crossed it several times, and even wove through trees and light brush. We passed what I believe was a small ranger cabin about halfway up the trail, and the forest began to become more dense around us as we progressed. Just before dusk, we reached the falls, where we had to maneuver over the creek and around a little pond that formed in the valley between boulders below the falls. Everything was covered in snow and water, which rewarded each of us with wet shoes and photos of the scenery. While I was balancing on a boulder, trying not to slip into freezing water for a photo, 2 distinct figures poked up across the pond/creek that we had to shimmy our way around to reach the falls. They were quite a distance away from us, about 100 plus feet, so I wasn't able to take in all the intricate details of their facial features, but I was able to discern a middle-aged man and woman. She held onto the man's arms while his other arm extended above and held a black umbrella over them both. What made them notable was the fact that they were wearing completely black outfits. Black trench coats, black pants, black boots, black gloves, and black hats. This was out of the ordinary from all the hikers we passed on the way up, all who wore standard hiking attire, windbreakers, snow jackets, hiking boots, etc. I pointed them out to my co-workers, and we continued to take photos of each other while the snow continued to weigh heavier, and the clouds quickly began to lose their luminescence. The couple stood atop the trail at the beginning of the pond, took in the view for a few minutes, then turned and disappeared down the trail faster than they had appeared. Seeing that the couple didn't even take the time to get close to the falls, we realised that we had to head back down the trail if we wanted to make it back, before we got snowed in or it became completely dark. We quickly made our way around the pond and creek back to where the couple was, trying to see if we could catch up closer to them so our groups would be a little closer. I assumed they were locals and knew the trail better. We caught up to where they were standing, but to our surprise, there was no sign of anyone being in the area. Not a single print. A playful panic began to rise as we started to jog back down the creek, looking for signs of the couple or the trail. While we rushed down, we came into a fork in the creek. We weren't sure which way led back to the trailhead, but I was able to convince my co-workers to trust my intuition and take the left fork despite their desire to take the other. We continued along the creek and found the ranger cabin, which indicated to us that we were in the clear. Soon enough, we had reached my car. Then after clearing the 2 inches of snow that had accumulated and some fancy ice driving in the dark, we were back in Salt Lake City. The image of that mysterious couple we encountered that year stuck with me. I have no idea who they were, what they were doing up there, where they came from, or where they went. We found no signs of anybody being on the trail on our way down. I looked at the trail on satellite images and found no alternative locations or trails they could have gone to. In hindsight, it was foolish to be on the trail that late in such conditions. I briefly looked into local legends, but never found anything similar to the couple we saw. Utah has an interesting history with religion and colonization. It's Ted Bundy country after all. I have no doubt that SLC attracts dark paranormal entities, but since I haven't found any resemblance in local legends, I simply identify them as Death and his companion, Misery. The day I heard the knocking, a sister-in-law texted me in the morning at 8:46 to ask if I had knocked on her and Jay's room. I texted back no, and that her text had woken me up. Elle was still in his room talking to his girlfriends. Once I got up and went to the living room, she explained that literally 5 minutes before she texted me, she was falling back asleep when she clearly heard someone knocking on her door. She got up to answer, and no one was there. Elle then started saying how 2 weeks prior, our dad had told him to lock the front door before he went to sleep. He agreed, said he would do it, and went back to what he was doing. Elle accidentally fell asleep, and he said someone whispered the front door right next to his ear. He first thought he imagined it, but Kovu was in his room also sleeping, and he also raised his head and looked around the room, like he heard the whisper too. Eventually, he did get up to lock the door. Elle and I joked around that there was a ghost, and sister-in-law, who's never experienced anything paranormal, got kind of spooked but tried to play it off by jokingly saying she would use her rosary for protection. Elle explained to sister-in-law that every house we've ever lived in was coincidentally haunted, and something always happened. I rebutted with, the houses were our family. Fast forward to my family deciding to go bowling that night, and I stayed behind to take care of the puppies. My family left around 5 or 6 p.m, and I decided to just chill in my room and use my computer. I made sure all the puppies were inside, my cats were inside, and I made sure all the doors were locked even though the sun was still out. I was pretty much comfortable in my room. Daisy and Kovu were sleeping on the floor, Lola and Chico were on my bed. The cats were in their tower, and the puppies were knocked out after running around in the backyard with their parents all day. It was quiet. I was listening to music, and then I noticed that the dogs were moving. It's like one of those moments where you're so focused on what you're doing, and then notice something isn't right. Kovu and Daisy were walking in and out of my room, and Chico and Lola had their heads raised, quite confused. I removed my headphones, and just very slightly, I could hear soft knocking. I thought I was imagining it at first. Normally when someone's on our property, the dogs go crazy and start barking. Even the puppies were picking up their parents' habits and would start barking too. But they were quiet, still sleeping in the laundry room, and the older dogs, they were hearing it, but they looked just as confused. I instantly went to check, thinking it was our elderly neighbour who was living by herself, thinking maybe she needed help. The knocking was coming from the front door, and our neighbour always made sure to knock on the sliding door. It took me a minute to register that she wasn't knocking, and I was already standing in our kitchen, looking out the window, looking at no one. Here's the kicker. Both the front door and the back door have an exterior metal door, and I heard someone knocking on the interior door, which is wood. I then remembered that I had knocked with both doors, so the knocking should have been on the exterior door. My brain immediately went to coyotes, as we live in the lower desert in an agricultural city, and my parents have chickens in the back. So I let the dogs outside, thinking they would go running to the back to chase the coyote. They didn't. Then I remembered that it was knocking, not scratching, so I immediately thought someone was trying to break into the house, since there were no cars in the driveway. I waited for the dogs to start running to the backyard, but all they did was look in the direction of the sliding door, completely quiet and still confused. All four of them. I looked to the back too and realised the lights were off and I couldn't see anything. I still wasn't sure what was going on, but I was starting to get an inkling that it wasn't a living person who knocked on the door. I went back inside to put on my sandals and get my phone, closing the exterior door behind me, thinking the dogs would start barking at any moment. Once I had everything I needed, I went to check on the dogs again. They still hadn't moved away from where they were and were still looking toward the sliding door. As soon as I was going into the laundry room to turn the lights from the backyard, my parents were entering our driveway, and that's when the dogs started barking in excitement. This happened on the first day of October. Nothing else happened after that. I told my brother what happened, but waited a couple days to tell sister-in-law, since I didn't want to scare her more. But yeah, our house ghost knocked on my door 10 minutes before my parents and siblings came back from bowling.
So roughly 10 years ago, I went on a 3-week holiday with my girlfriend. We booked a beautiful private villa in a town called Canggu. It had a double bedroom, a big lounge and a swimming pool with a view over the rice paddies. To get to the entrance of the villa, we had to walk through an alley, and on the left of that was a big fenced off house. I always take notice of my surroundings when I'm in a new place, and it looked to me that this place was occupied by locals. Their cars were behind the fence, and I saw a dog walking around on the property. On the second night, that dog started barking. My family has owned dogs since I was little, so I know it's normal for a dog to bark out of fear occasionally, so I let it be. But I was checking out that place with a bit more attention. I'm curious about nature, and now inclined to start asking around if anyone knew something about the situation. The Balinese boy who came to manage the pool didn't speak English too well, so I asked the cleaning lady. She was very nice and told me that the residents were still living there, but were out of town for some reason. I also asked if she knew if the dog was getting any attention from the owners, and she replied that the residents came in every day around noon to manage things. So now it's the 4th night and the dog is still barking at night. It starts as soon as it gets dark, and I'm beginning to worry about the 4-legged furball. I tried to calm it a couple times by calling it to the fence, but it was just too frightened to come near. So the next day, I'm out on post at noon, and indeed I see someone at the house. I walked up and said hi, but not speaking English, so I started making barking sounds and pointing to their fence. Didn't make sense to the guy. I guess he was in a hurry. All of a sudden he walked out with a forced smile. Then the 5th morning. I'm looking in the bathroom mirror and I got bags under my eyes. So does my girlfriend, but she's more capable of zoning out the noise of the dog and falling asleep anyway. I'm calling the owner of our villa now, and since they're Dutchies too, it makes it pretty easy to explain what's happening. They told me they were out of town and wouldn't be back until after the weekend. I told them about the neighbour dog barking me out of my sleep for 4 days straight, and they comforted me saying they will compensate us for it. Just visit us after the weekend and we'll sort things out. 5th night. We fell asleep around midnight, but it woke me up again. Dog was in terror and I decided to check it out again. This wasn't normal and I was getting more frustrated and agitated, thinking how I could shut that dog's trap. I know it's not the dog's fault,
but I needed a quick solution to shut it up and get some sleep after 4 nights. So in the dead of night, I got a bucket and filled it with water, sneaked up stealth mode and threw it over the fence. I couldn't see the dog, but I knew it was a hit because it gave a single surprised bark and then it stopped. I stayed there for a little bit to see if anything weird was going on, and I just got this weird vibe around me. One I recognised and gave me goosebumps. I rushed back to bed and fell into a deep, deep sleep. Now it starts to get weird. In my dream that same night, I'm aware I'm dreaming and something is attacking me. I get pinned down and I'm not able to move anymore. I know I'm dreaming and I force myself to wake up, but I can't. While I'm fighting this thing off in my dream, I wake up and realise I'm still fighting it. It takes quite some force to release the weight off me, and I'm making sounds as if I'm weightlifting far above my strength. I literally feel my stomach being pushed down to the max, and I'm in survival mode, struggling to push it off as it slowly floats away. The transition from dream to wake states was so weird. I'm screaming at it in my dream, putting up the fight. I wake up and I'm roaring and still fighting while an intense force is crushing my stomach and chest. When finally I come to my senses, I'm sitting straight up in bed next to my girl who slept through it all. I had to meditate a bit and fell asleep again and told my girl the story when we woke up. Weird thing is that after that night, the dog stopped barking and everything turned normal. After the weekend, I got in touch with the owners and they told me the neighbours got in a family fight. The cleaning lady was familiar with the neighbours and she told me eventually that voodoo was used in the family affair. It turned so bad for the neighbours that they had to flee their house and were living with their family. They left that dog to protect the property, poor dog, and only were brave enough to visit the place during the day. The owner we rented the place for gave us that first week for free. My girlfriend wanted to visit the hospital in KCMO that had abandoned since 2001, built in 1906, so we went with her parents. In the beginning, we couldn't find the entrance, and as we walked around the building, I began to feel somewhat sick to my stomach, almost as if I had to use the restroom and couldn't hold it. We finally found a side entrance double door that had been sealed off with wood stapled down the middle. We had ripped it apart and were able to pull the doors open to go inside, then shut the doors behind us to avoid others coming in and possibly scaring us. It has a total of 6 floors, with a basement included and an elevator that no longer functions. As we began walking, I still had that very ill sensation, as if I couldn't bear to hold what was inside me. We started exploring and it just got worse. We ended up exploring the entire building, from the basement where the morgue was to the 6th floor. Had some spirits where there were needles, used fluid bags and other prior hospital utilities that should have definitely been thrown away before closing out. Finally, 2 hours and 10 minutes later, we left the building and I overall felt a sense of relief. The very next day, in my house, around 12:51 a.m, I remembered something in my garage, right next to me as my room is by the basement, made a loud noise, and my first reaction was that my husky was inside, and I texted my sister, she's 19, to come downstairs. I was gaming at the time and didn't think much of it. She asked what I wanted, and I asked if Sophie, our husky, was inside, and she said no, so I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I heard a loud noise in the garage. And she was hesitant about looking, but finally did. She noticed this plastic container had been knocked down. It had all 4 wheels, nothing on top. It just went about a foot away from the cage it was next to. We were kind of like, oh, okay. We didn't know what exactly could have caused it. Definitely not wind, as there is none. We haven't had mice in over a year at this point. Used to have a bad mice issue. And even if we did, the force in which it was knocked. There's no way something as small as a mouse could do that. First incident. The next, about 3 to 5 days later, My sister is upstairs in our living room that's closer to our backyard, up at 1 a.m. messaging her friend. As she's replying with a voice message we actually have saved, she heard a loud thump/ball noise, almost as if a ping pong ball had bounced off something, but a bit louder. Just random noise coming from a section of the room where she claims nothing fell to have made a noise. Third incident, my mom tells me a few days later she was up at 5 a.m. and heard loud thump noises from my room. She claimed it sounded like I was going up the stairs. I was not even home that morning or night she heard it, as I stayed at my girlfriend's house. So I'm starting to think, is there some kind of ghost or something that makes this stuff happen? Or what's going on? Because I remembered this started happening the day after the hospital visit. Fourth incident. I was upstairs in my sister's room with my cat and I was just playing with him. And out of nowhere, something behind me, a window ledge that you place on top as a decor for looks, had slid and fell back. It's approximately 6 to 7 feet tall and it was placed against the wall. And my sister claims the way it was placed, no way it could have fell without it getting pushed. As it had about a 65 to 70 degree angle towards the wall, gravity definitely would keep it stable from falling back. So at this point I'm like, okay, what's going on? Nope, not done yet. Fifth incident. I'm at my girlfriend's house and my sister is texting me at 12:30 a.m. or some super late time. She sends me a video of my kitten being super weird and staring off into a certain part of the living room. Same one she heard the noise. She sends another video, and this is where it gets spooky. Asher lays down, and as soon as he starts looking away, the noise is heard again. And even Asher heard it, as it scared him and made him look toward the direction of the ceiling, or corner of the wall where it seemed to have come from. So now, I'm like, okay, something weird is up. The last incident that happened probably about a month ago, I was laying sleeping in bed, and above me there's this Joker wooden framed picture that's placed directly center of my bed, about 6 to 10 inches above my head, and 2 or 3 inches away from where my head rests. I woke up the next day with the picture, which is roughly 1.5 feet in width and 2 feet in height, was directly next to my bed in between the cat tower I have and the bed, and it was upside down. Since then, nothing unusual has happened besides the garage item falling again. But something was placed above it, and we think it had something to do with it, unlike last time. My kitten also acts crazy around 12 to 1 a.m, but it's normal from what Google says. But these incidents are freaky, and I have the sound recordings for both and the videos as well of my kitten. December 18th, 2021. My sister was recording my kitten acting very weird and sketched out around 10:30 p.m. as I was showering. She recorded another thump/ball falling kind of noise right around Asher looking up at the ceiling, towards the same direction we caught him in the second video. My sister did not even realise the noise until I pointed it out, as it made me actually say, what the fuck? Then she started freaking out too, as she claimed she didn't recognise hearing that as she recorded. This is kind of becoming a bit weird for me, but I'll still believe it can be scientifically proven. Just odd. My house, after living for 18 to 19 years in it, never made noises before, and before claiming temperatures drop can cause pipes to make noises, keep in mind it's December, yet somehow the weather here is still somewhat warm. Last week, we had 70-degree Fahrenheit weather, and 50 tornadoes touched down across a few states at the same time. I haven't really spoken to anyone about this, other than my boyfriend and his brother. His brother gave off the impression he thought I was crazy and laughed it off, so I've not said anything to anyone since. It's been driving me crazy ever since I saw it. This happened in March 2021. Where I live in England, there's a lot of countryside. At the time it happened, I was driving down a small country road that was parallel to a main road. Just a large field, and bush on the other side next to the main road to separate them. I was talking to my boyfriend and I noticed this very tall human-like figure at the side of the road. It was extremely skinny, like it was skin on bones and nothing else. Didn't appear to have clothes on, pale skin. It looked really unhealthy. I don't really see its face, but from the quick glance I got it looked like it had an indistinguishable facial features, like it was blurred on a Photoshop app. It crossed the road into the field in front of me extremely quickly, and then disappeared into an open field. I slowed right down and looked back into the field. It was mid-evening, so it was getting dark, but enough that you could still see. There was nothing it could have hid behind. The grass was too short to hide in, and there was no way any human could have ran the entire length of that field to the bush on the other side in such a short amount of time. It was just vanished into thin air. My boyfriend told me to stop the car, but I was terrified and everything in me told me to continue driving, so I never stopped to check it out. Not sure whether that was a mistake or not. I don't know why it's terrified me so much. I can't stop thinking about it and it's driving me crazy. I'm searching for an explanation. I know it may be unlikely, but has anyone else seen something like this? If so, any ideas what it was? My only explanation is something paranormal. If it were human, how did it just vanish like that? I really hope this is allowed. I'm really sorry if it isn't. We often go to the Cottonwood Disc Golf Course to eat and play, as it's been a very comfortable, convenient place to do so. But within the past month or so, we've experienced a lot of weird and scary things that make us not want to go back alone. The first thing we both experienced was honestly the most terrifying night of my life. We went to some park to eat some calzones and relax. However, the area, although lit normally, seemed darker than usual and 100% silent. My partner then felt very, very odd and watched, and locked the doors without saying a word. Eventually, they spotted some kind of fabric in the right mirror outside the car, flapping around. Feeling immediately unsettled, they tried to focus on other things. I was oblivious to the entirety of this until I saw the same piece of fabric flapping outside as well, and having a wave of intense dread and unease washed over me. Without questioning a thing, we drove away as fast as we could. The feeling didn't leave until the next morning though, and we drove for multiple hours to try and avoid it, even driving close to downtown, which was the only thing that made it feel even slightly better, until we left the area again. We felt watched within our bedroom the entire night afterwards. Eventually, while thinking about the experience, they got what they described as a flash of the creature's life, and were too frightened to describe it. A couple weeks later, after calming down from the adventure, I had seen a very tall, pale yet dark-skinned creature, almost as if it were oily. It had long arms and looked somehow rough. It's difficult to explain. I too got a flash of its face while driving away, which was highly unsettling, but my partner didn't seem to notice. So I kept quiet about the whole thing, and just tonight, while disc golfing, they saw some sort of long-armed humanoid watching us from the darkness of the woods surrounding us. A pale face with dark eyes, a wide mouth that could be understood as smiling, with bits of skin connecting the top and bottom lips, and a rough but oily complexion. We're mostly posting this to find out information on it, as nothing we've seen has matched our description exactly, and we want to know if anyone else has seen something at this park, or has had similar experiences. So, I guess it started to begin sometime back in June, right before graduation. As most people are, I was happily awaiting the day I'd finally be out of school. I was eager and excited. But I guess something seemed that and lashed onto me. It was the week before graduation when I started to feel an extremely negative energy coming directly from a specific corner of my closet. My closet is one of the types where it's two white folding doors that you slide open. I was just up watching YouTube that night when it just felt like kind of like I was being watched. It didn't take long for me to realize where this feeling was coming from. The corner of my closet with a vent. Now, I'm no idiot. I know we sometimes feel like we're being watched even though there's nothing there. But this felt absolutely different. You know the scenes in that film Insidious where Dalton falls off the ladder in the dark attic and stares at the furnace? Or the scene where Elise is staring at the corner of the ceiling at the demon and no one else can see it? That's what it felt like. It wasn't just the occasional feeling of being watched. It was the feeling of, if I look away, something is going to pounce from that corner and eat me alive. The presence felt threatening. So I took some sage and smudged my room. But even then, I didn't feel safe enough to sleep until the sun rose. But I had an even worse experience the next day. I typically kept my closet open, and because it made me feel more comfortable, but that changed after this. It was around 2 p.m. when I was just watching a movie our teacher had on in Zoom, when I sensed movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked over and saw what looked like an old woman crawling along the top shelf of my closet. The apparition lasted only for a split second, but it scared the living shit out of me. It wasn't like how they say in those type of stories. She wasn't transparent. She wasn't a shadow. She looked like a living, real and breathing person crawling at an impossible speed. But despite the fact that it felt like my soul left and was halfway to hell already after seeing that, I'm willing to admit that it could have just been from my exhaustion from school and the 1 hour sleep. But ever since graduation, I felt like something is watching me at night. I can feel its eyes on me as I sleep. And like always, it's never just the feeling of being watched. It always feels directly threatening. Not a night has gone by once then in my room where I don't feel someone or something is standing right above me as I sleep, watching me, threatening me. For the longest time, that's all it was. But I kept feeling like I was going insane. But I know I'm not. I sleep alone at my mom's house, and I'm perfectly fine. I feel alone. But it started to get worse when it felt like something started to touch me when I tried to sleep. It starts with the feeling of being gazed upon like prey. Then as I start to ignore it, it feels like hands slowly gliding down my blanket. The first time it happened, I jumped out of bed thinking someone broke in, only to find my room completely empty. Then it started vocalizing, I think. The first time I heard it was back in August when it sounded like an older man sighed at the foot of my bed. I didn't dare go back to sleep. The second time it sounded like a woman gasping, and the third time it sounded like an old man imitating a puppy's yip right in my ear. I also feel like I could hear rummaging in my room at night. Occasionally it sounds like a bag is being moved or something. I've dreaded going to sleep every night, so I started bringing my dog Bugsy to bed with me, and it seemed to make activity disappear for about a week. I distinctly remember cuddling up to Bugsy one night, but I couldn't fall asleep because I felt Bugsy pitter-patter on the foot of my bed. It started imitating my dog. That was its new thing for a while, the feeling of dog feet walking around my legs. Then I would start hearing Bugsy bark in the rooms he wasn't in. Same for my dog Shadow. And it was around this time when Shadow died in his sleep from a random heart attack completely out of nowhere. And I'm terrified that it was a direct threat to me, killing my precious angel for no reason but to threaten me. Then it started to threaten Bugsy. Every night starting after Shadow's death in October, he'd growl at the closet. This happened for about 2 weeks, until it evolved into Bugsy full-on snarling at the closet like it was taunting them. The most recent activity was tonight. That's why I'm writing this. I felt the eyes, the threatening purpose. I felt the satanic was running down my back and up my neck all night. I need help. I need to know what this is and how to get rid of it. Or I fear what I'm doing Leave my dog, Bugsy, and me. This happened to me a couple years ago, but at dinner last night my parents and I talked about it again. Growing up, our house felt dark. Because of the placements of the windows, not much sun would shine in. Other than that, it was a normal home. There were little things here and there that were odd though. There was a room at the end of the hall that my best friend and I would have our sleepovers in, like a second family room that was connected to the kitchen. We would be up giggling late at night, and we would hear what sounded like the cupboard shutting. Since that family room didn't have a door and it was closer to the kitchen, I always made her sleep closest to it. Terrible, I know, lol. Also, in the middle of the night, I would hear what sounded like someone running alongside the length of our roof. My mother also heard this. I always told myself that someone was doing parkour in our neighbourhood, and that would put me at ease enough to forget about the noise and fall asleep. Once, my younger sister said she woke up one night and there was a little girl with a scary face in her doorway. We didn't believe her much. When I was 19, I moved into that room at the end of the kitchen. More independence as it was far away from the other side of the house with all the bedrooms. Sleeping in that room, I would feel like something was in the corner sometimes, in the shadows, watching me. Since it didn't have a door, I used to use those wooden room splitters that people change behind. One night, I'm on my phone under the covers in the dark, and I hear what sounds like someone throw themselves to the floor. I sat straight up in the dark and called out to my sister, assuming it might have been her. We had no dogs or pets, and even though it was out of character for my sister to do something like that, this was my first and only assumption as to what made that noise. As I sat in bed, my eyes adjusting to the dark, I heard that thing start crawling on the carpet and go under my bed, hitting my shoeboxes underneath. When I tell you I leaped out of bed and ran to go get my dad, he came to my room all half asleep, laid on my bed, told me there was nothing there and went back to his room. I sat on my desk across the room from my bed, staring at the space underneath my bed. Even at 19, there was no way I was looking under there. And what? Be confronted with a monster so hideous and so traumatizing? Growing up on paranormal and horror films, my imagination really was my own enemy at this point. After what felt like hours, I told myself I had managed the whole thing. And knowing I had to get up for school in 2 hours, I laid back down in bed. As I got comfortable on my back, my bed began to breathe. The mattress beneath me rose a bit and sank a little bit. Rose and sank. I just stared at the ceiling in the dark, trying to calm my breathing and keep my heart from exploding out my ears. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up the next morning feeling fine. I never felt that watchful feeling again. It's as if that thing crawled back home from a portal underneath my bed. After a couple of days, I finally lifted my bed up to check underneath, and all my shoeboxes were perfectly aligned how I left them. I told my parents what happened, and they said I had dreamed the whole thing.